He saw the bear long before he heard it. A giant shadow swaying between the pines, moving wrong, slow, uneven, as if the wilderness itself had taken a knee. Then, without warning, the animal collapsed. One moment, it was a living mountain cutting through the frostlit clearing. The next, it hit the ground so hard the earth seemed to flinch. Daniel froze. A fully grown brown bear lying motionless at his feet, breath thin as mist, eyes flickering with a fear no wild creature should ever know. And in that impossible moment, he realized the forest was asking him to act. For several seconds, Daniel couldn't move. The cold air clung to his lungs like wet cloth as he stared at the massive creature sprawled across the snow. The bear's chest rose in shallow, fractured breaths, each one sounding like a secret slipping away. A thin ribbon of foam clung to its muzzle, trembling every time the lungs struggled for another inhale. This wasn't exhaustion. This was an old age. Something else was working its way through the animal's blood like a shadow with teeth. Daniel forced himself to blink, to breathe, to remember who he was and why he was here. He hadn't come looking for trouble. He'd only planned to survey winter den sites for the Wildlife Foundation. Routine work, a checklist, a thermos of coffee, still warm back in his truck. But routine had dissolved the moment the bear fell, and suddenly the world had narrowed to a single question. Was he too late? He scanned the tree-line instinctively, searching for signs of a sow, cubs, anything that might make this moment even more dangerous. Nothing. Only the whisper of wind clawing at the branches and the distant croak of a raven circling overhead. The bear twitched, one violent, uncontrolled jerk that sent snow scattering. Daniel flinched, heart pounding, but the movement wasn't aggression. It was panic in a body that no longer obeyed itself. His training kicked in piece by piece. Shallow breathing, pinpoint pupils, muscle tremors, foam. His mind arranged the symptoms one by one until they built a conclusion he didn't want to believe. Poison, likely carbamate, the same kind used in illegal predator baits. Someone had laid a trap in this forest. And this bear, this enormous, breathing monument of the wild, had wandered straight into it. Daniel reached for the radio attached to his vest, fingers stiff from cold and fear. "Base, this is Reed. About a downed adult male. Symptoms suggest toxin exposure. Location grid echo 3. I need vet response ASAP. Static." Then a crackled reply. "Copy. Fastest dispatch is 35 minutes. Daniel, do not approach. Repeat, do not approach." He looked at the bear again. Its breath was thinning. Its eyes fluttered like candlelight in a dying room. 35 minutes was too long. Way too long. Daniel lowered the radio slowly, the warning echoing in his ears long after the static faded. Do not approach. The rule was simple. The rule had saved countless lives, both human and animal. But rules didn't account for the way the bear's ribs shuddered, or how its paw dragged helplessly across the snow like it was trying to anchor itself to the living world. He took one careful step forward. The bear's eye cracked open, just a sliver of amber, glazed but aware enough to register movement. Not focus, not threat, just recognition that something was there. Something still breathing when it couldn't. Daniel swallowed hard. "Easy, big fella," he murmured, though the words trembled with the cold climbing up his spine. He stayed in the creature's sight line, angling his body sideways the way rangers had drilled into him. Never head-on, never fast. Another tremor rolled through the bear's frame, rippling its thick fur like wind across tall grass. The foam at its lips thickened. Its breath stuttered. He didn't need a lab test to confirm what his gut already knew. This bear wouldn't last 10 minutes, let alone 35. Daniel dropped to a crouch, unzipping his pack with slow, deliberate movements. The forest seemed to lean in, every sound holding its breath as he pulled out the small, orange medical pouch he carried for field emergencies. Inside was a vial he'd rarely touched except during training. Atropine. One of the few things that could give a poison animal even a thin chance. His instructor's voice whispered from memory. "You administer this only if there's no alternative, no time, and no backup." And you do it knowing it could kill you if anything goes wrong. He exhaled through numb lips. Guess today's that day. The bear let out a low, broken groan. Not a growl, more like a plea. Daniel slid on his nitrile gloves, hands shaking. The syringe glittered faintly in the pale light as he drew the amber liquid into the barrel. He waited for a moment when the bear's body relaxed, just a heartbeat of stillness, and then moved. 3 yards. 2. 1. Close enough to feel the animal's heat. Close enough to die if instinct woke at the wrong moment. He steadied his breath and reached for the thick muscle of the bear's hind leg. The needle slid into the dense muscle with a quiet resistance, like piercing wet leather. For an instant, everything froze. The wind, the forest, even Daniel's pulse. Then the bear's entire body tightened, muscles seizing in one violent arc. A massive paw lashed out blindly, slicing through the air with a force that could have opened him like fabric. Daniel dropped backward, boots digging trenches in the snow as he threw his hands up in reflex. The paw missed by inches, close enough for him to feel the gust of displaced air graze his cheek like a warning whispered too softly. The bear's groan rattled through the clearing, deep and raw. Foam bubbled at its mouth, dripping onto the snow in thick strands. Daniel scrambled sideways, never turning away, staying just far enough to avoid a second reflex strike. Easy, easy, his words came out in uneven breaths, but he kept talking anyway. His voice felt like the only thin rope connecting them to survival on either side of the gulf. The bear's breaths came fast, too fast, shallow as paper tearing. Daniel watched each rise and fall, counting, hoping for the slightest change. Atropine bought minutes, not miracles. Still, minutes were more than the bear had before. "You're not dying here," he murmured. "Not like this. Not alone." The forest answered with a muted hush, the sound of snow sliding off branches. Somewhere far off, a raven croaked once, as if marking the moment on some unseen ledger. The bear's tremors eased, barely, but enough to see. Enough for Daniel's heart to unclench a fraction. He clicked his radio. Base, atropine administered. Time 14:47. Subject reactive. Muscle spasms decreasing. Static. Then the dispatcher's voice, tight with worry. "Hold position, Daniel. Rangers are 15 minutes out." 15 minutes. A lifetime and a blink. Daniel stayed low, knees soaking in the snow, eyes locked on the bear's face. Its pupils quivered, then widened a fraction, just enough to catch a glint of recognition. Or maybe there was hope, reflected in fur and breath and fear. He wasn't sure. The bear's chest hitched. For a terrifying moment, it didn't rise again. Daniel leaned forward, breath in his throat. "Come on," he whispered, voice cracking. "Breathe." And then, slowly, stubbornly, the rib cage expanded. A deeper breath, then another. The first fragile sign that life was pushing back. The bear's breath steadied, still ragged, still too thin, but undeniably stronger. Daniel felt something loosen inside his chest, a tightness he hadn't realized was strangling him until it finally let go. He didn't dare move closer, but he stayed within the bear's fading field of vision, letting his presence work like a tether against the darkness, trying to pull the animal under. Minutes stretched, bending into something that felt like hours. Snow drifted down in slow spirals, settling on the bear's fur, melting almost instantly against the lingering heat of life. Daniel brushed a sleeve across his forehead. He hadn't noticed he was sweating despite the cold. Then, faint at first, he heard it, a low rumble echoing through the valley. Engines. The rescue team. Daniel exhaled shakily. "Hang in there, big guy. Help's coming." The bear's ear twitched at the sound of his voice. Not in fear, not in aggression, just recognition. As if on some deep instinctual level, the animal remembered him from somewhere in the tangled threads of the wild. Branches snapped at the edge of the tree line. Ranger vehicles rolled into the clearing, tires crunching over ice. 2 figures jumped out, Ranger Whitmore and Dr. Haven, both moving with the urgency of people who've seen too many close calls to waste a single second. Whitmore's eyes swept the scene and widened. Daniel, what did you do? Daniel didn't look away from the bear. What I had to. Haven knelt beside him, medical kit already open, scanning the bear with brisk, practiced movements. She checked the pupils, the tremors, the respiration. Her jaw tightened. You bought him time, she said quietly. Without that dose, he'd be gone. Whitmore gave Daniel a long, conflicted look, a mixture of reprimand, shock, and something like respect hiding beneath the layers. You broke every protocol we have, he muttered. But damn it, you might have saved him. The vet team moved quickly, setting up 4 lines, warming blankets, monitoring vitals. The forest filled with controlled chaos. Voices, equipment, steam rising from the bear's fur with each strengthening breath. But through it all, the animal's hazy gaze kept drifting back to Daniel. As if, in that fragile line between death and returning life, the bear had chosen the one shape in the world it trusted to stay. The rescue team worked with the precision of people who understood exactly how thin the line between life and loss could be. For fluids dripped in slow, determined rhythm. Warm packs were layered along the bear's sides. Oxygen hissed softly. The forest, moments ago silent and ancient, now pulsed with human urgency. Boots in snow, clipped commands, the rustle of medical gear. Yet somehow, in the middle of all that movement, a stillness formed around Daniel and the bear. Dr. Haven checked the monitors, brow furrowing. He's stabilizing, she said, almost in disbelief. Pulse is climbing, respiration improving. He wants to live. Daniel didn't answer. He just watched the bear's chest rise and fall with steadier force. Each breath proof that the wild wasn't giving up its giant so easily. He'd seen death before. Too many times in too many quiet corners of the world where animals faded with no audience but the trees. This wasn't that. This was a fight. A stubborn, furious fight. Whitmore stepped beside him, lowering his voice. You know, if things had gone wrong, it would have been your life on this snow. Daniel nodded. I know, and you'd still do it again. It wasn't a question. Daniel looked at the bear, the heaving ribs, the twitch of an ear, the faint amber flicker behind half-lidded eyes. Yeah, he whispered. I would. For a while, the team kept working. The forest shifted toward dusk, the sky warming gold behind the pines. Shadows stretched long across the clearing, brushing against the bear's fur like fading memories of the day. When the worst danger had passed, Haven signaled for the team to pause. Let's give him space, she said. He needs calm, and he needs the one voice he's been listening for. Daniel felt every eye on him as he stepped closer. The bear's breathing had changed, not frantic, not broken, but deep and tired, like a creature rediscovering the rhythm of its own lungs. When Daniel knelt at a safe distance, the bear's gaze drifted toward him, slow but deliberate. The connection felt as real as breath in cold air. Hey, Daniel murmured softly. You're still with me. The bear blinked once. A slow, heavy blink. Recognition. Not human, not tame, something older. A memory of a moment when death hovered and didn't win. He talked then, not to fill the silence, but because silence felt wrong. He spoke about the cold day, about the broken traps they kept finding, about how the world was cruel in ways it never warned its creatures about. He spoke until the bear's breaths evened into a steady cadence that settled deep into the clearing like a reassurance the forest itself needed to hear. Whitmore stepped up behind him. He'll make it, he said quietly. We'll transport him to the Ridge facility. Full recovery's likely. Daniel nodded. Relief unspooling through him like a long-held breath finally released. The danger was not gone. Poison scars left traces unseen, but the road ahead was no longer a cliff's edge. The team began preparing for transport, gently, reverently. The bear didn't fight them, didn't panic. Every few seconds, his gaze flicked toward Daniel, as if anchoring himself to the one constant in the chaos. When they loaded him into the transport sled, the forest glowed with the last light of the day. Snow caught the fading sun, glittering like shards of something sacred. Daniel placed a gloved hand against the cold metal as the bear's massive silhouette settled inside. "You're going home," he whispered. "Not today, but soon." The bear's ears twitched, and in that small, wordless movement, Daniel felt something undeniable pass between them. A promise, fragile but fierce, that the wild still remembered kindness and would, somehow, remember him.